All right, well, thank you.
All right, we're going to move into a presentation. This is going to be for new data supporting Panther conservation and connectivity, uh, presented by Amber Crooks with the Conservancy of Southwest Florida. So the purpose of this item is to share studies by the Florida Panther Recovery Implementation Team, transportation subteam, and agency resources to guide Florida Panther conservation and connectivity needs. And the CCMP connection to this one is the relation to fish, wildlife, and habitat protection. Action 2, protect, monitor, and restore environmentally sensitive lands and waterways, including critical habitat areas. So thank you for the presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for accommodating me via Zoom. Sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I appreciate the time to be able to share some things with you. Hopefully, folks in the room and folks that you know might get some good use out of this information. But before I get started on some of the nitty-gritty on the technical on these cool reports, I want to, acknowledge that this is the work of a team, a larger team of people. And that's, as you mentioned, the Panther Recovery Implementation Team, Transportation Sub-Team, who does get the award for perhaps the longest name ever. Uh, but we were part of an assembled task force by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Perhaps Jennifer and Nicole might remember back in 2014 when we got that letter from DOI asking for an appointment to that team. And we were in good company. As you can see, probably very small text, but over in the left-hand corner, all of the other members of the transportation sub-team. We had NGO representation from Florida Wildlife Federation, the Defenders of Wildlife. We had agencies as well, like the local transportation planning, FWC, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, of course, FDOT. And then also academics. We had on our team Dan Smith, who I have to give kudos to perhaps being one of our state's best road ecologists. So we were able to, in our years, do quite a few things. Produce these three reports that we're still trying to promote and get the word out about. But like the Rolling Stones, we're not disbanded, but we're really not pumping out the hits in the last few years. But we do have these three great reports, and some of them are actually updated annually. So with that, go ahead to the next slide if you wouldn't mind. So today you're going to get the three reports, a little bit information about them, and an extra bonus map that will tie it all together. So next slide. So before I put on my cheerleading outfit and kind of tell you a little bit more about the sub-team's reports, I'm going to pop on my Conservancy hat and kind of talk a little bit about how we would use some of this information or how some of this information might dovetail with other things that we're doing for panther conservation. So one of the key things that the Conservancy of Southwest Florida is focused on is, of course, habitat protection, and that's really protecting the source areas of where these cats live currently in Southwest Florida, and trying to protect those core habitats and some of those really important habitat chunks that we see throughout the state, and of course the corridor connections between them. Next slide. And then, of course, even if we have the habitat, we also have to be working with people living in those landscapes to try to educate them about living with wildlife. And that might take the form of working with a county on a bear attractant ordinance and bear resistant trash cans, or that may take the form of working with individual homeowners who keep goats, keep sheep, keep other animals that would attract panthers. That could take the form also of compensating ranchers that have small operations when there's a calf that gets preyed upon by a panther. So we do have some different arms to try to promote living peacefully with our native wildlife. Next slide. And this has a video, so you might be able to play that there at the bottom. So of course, once we have the corridors hopefully secured in place, We also need to look at infrastructure where we do have roadways like this one here, State Road 29 in Collier County. But believe me, there are other roadways on some maps I'll show you shortly where we do have existing roadkill problems. And so part of our charge at the Conservancy would also be trying to promote infrastructure like underpasses or overpasses to make sure that this Panther, FP 260, is having safe passage between two blocks of habitat and that he's not having to take his life into his hands as he's trying to pass. And you can see active vehicle passing by as he's exploring this underpass here. Next slide.
Sorry.
No problem. Just have to hit one more time.
Yeah.
There we go. All right, and then of course, the main thrust of today's presentation is about the data, about the science, information that will hopefully be used by the community, interested folks like yourself, and also the decision makers. And so with that, next slide, if you wouldn't mind, let's go ahead and dive into these three reports from the transportation sub-team. So I'm going to go through a couple, each of them and tell you a little bit how we formed these models, how we formed these reports. This is the first one that we did. We started in 2017, but it's actually being updated annually. It's being updated by FDOT, and it's available on FDOT's webpage at their ETDM site. This particular report speaks to roadkill hotspots, essentially. We used ArcGIS to buffer the point where a Panther vehicle collision happened and the roadway. And with the intersection of those two aspects, it creates these segments. And you can see the rainbow colors on the right-hand panel where, and this is the latest one through December of 2025, where some of those really bad roadkill hotspots are. If the warmer the color, the worse and more severe of the hotspot. Next slide. This is a little bit zoomed into some of those worse areas, the red and the orange areas, and many of them are in Collier County at this time. One of the red, most severe hotspots is on US 41 near Turner River in the Big Cypress. And then on the right-hand panel, you can see kind of a zoom into eastern Collier County, where we have most of the other worst severe red roadkill hotspot segments on roads like Mockley Road, Golden Gate, State Road 82, and then State Road 29 is a big one. Next slide. But I also wanted to zoom out a little bit so that we could see a little bit more of the Schnepp area. And you can kind of see, there's still some really bad hotspots in Lee County, in Hendry County. We have a few. And then as we move north, we don't have quite the severe problem that we do in the core of the habitat in Southwest Florida. But even into Glades County, you can see that we do have some hotspots. Next slide. And I'm happy to take questions at the end if I need to give you more information or didn't explain the report or the model properly, but we'll move on to the next one for now. So this next report that we did, we had focused so much on Southwest Florida that then we thought, and we're given a suggestion by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that we really need to take time and pop up to I-4. Because just like all over Florida and in Southwest Florida, it is experiencing quite a bit of growth pressure. And I think the concern and the desire to kind of move north and look at I-4 is because the agency was concerned that we were going to be losing perhaps the last of the permeable areas along that I-4 corridor that stretches from Tampa up to Daytona. And so with the work of the transportation sub-team, we identified at least 5 areas that could be still permeable by wildlife. Now, this report is dated 2020. So of course, things change all the time. But the good news here is that with this report being completed in 2020, FDOT have moved very, very quickly to try and secure some of those last permeable areas. For example, up in Volusia County at item E, the Tiger Bay area. Even at the time that we were finishing the report, they were working on some crossings there that would mostly for bear and for deer, but certainly could accommodate panthers. Next slide. And then kind of again, zooming in, kind of focusing in on the areas that overlap with Chenep's boundary, there are some of those permeable areas in the Polk County area. This is one of those areas. This particular one would connect the Halochi and the Green Swamp area. And next slide, if you wouldn't mind. Some good news is that, again, DOT working very quickly to do two different crossings in this area, and there may be more opportunity in the future in this particular area to add even more. But they have completed one on I-4 and one on an adjacent roadway, and that has helped already. I don't think they've gotten a panther yet, but they've gotten some wildlife already using that structure at I-4. Next slide. And then I'm moving a little bit further west. This is another one of those areas in Polk County that this report identified as a permeable opportunity. Along I-4, it would connect the Tenor Rock area up to another Halochi area and some other parcels north. And this is an area where DOT has planned for an overpass. And this will be, they say, the first overpass specifically designated for wildlife use in the state of Florida. And so they're moving forward with an investment at this overpass. And next slide. And then the last report I wanted to spend some time and let you know about is the one that we completed in 2022. And so we had the information about existing, problematic roads in Southwest Florida. We now have the goal at I-4 of where we need these cats to go because we're building crossings for them. What about all that land in between? And so this particular report was really designed to try to give us a sense, because we don't have as many roadkill data points in those areas. Where would they go? Where would the Panthers, would they turn left? Would they use this forest patch? Would they, what direction are they going to go? And so based on what we know about Panther habitat selection, this model is give us some sense of the likely paths that a Panther would take, moving from Southwest Florida, Collier County, up across the river and hopefully to I-4 and beyond. And so the way that this model was put together, you see the chart in the middle there. That is based off of some Panther information. What do they tend to select? What are sort of medium values? What will they use in proximity to their presence on the landscape? Things like agriculture. And then what would they tend to avoid? Things like roads and intense development. And then on the table on the right-hand side, we have our sources in the blue, places that we know Panthers are, and then the destinations that we want the model then to connect in the yellow. So go ahead to the next slide. And you can see on the right-hand panel those blue source areas in Southwest Florida, and then the yellow destinations that we ask this model to then connect. So we have destinations that go all the way even north of I-4, but places like Avon Park, Mayaca, Babcock, Green Swamp. And so on the left-hand panel, you can see the results of the model. It is essentially those purple strings are that main least cost path is how they refer it, meaning the least cost to the Panther, the least risk to the Panther. But then the model also, we asked it to give sort of a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary corridor linkages so we could help prioritize some of those linkages. And next slide. And kind of wrapping this up, this is the bonus map that we wanted to mention. This is not a transportation map, but I don't know if Julie Morris is in the room, but I have to just give extreme kudos to her for all of her work on this. But this is something that the Conservancy has supported very much, this Everglades to Gulf Conservation Area initiative. And the thing I wanted to point out with this is a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service conservation area, and it's intended within this 4 million acre boundary to prioritize some land acquisition and some conservation easements. And the thing I wanted to point out here that's relevant to these transportation subteam reports is you can see kind of an arm stretching north. following essentially that Peace River corridor up through DeSoto, Hardy, Polk, and then up to Lakeland. And I do believe that that arm at I-4 matches very well with that permeability study that the transportation sub-team produced and some of those overpass plans that DOT is pursuing. In fact, next slide. I think those are the same areas there. So, my message to you today is not only to become familiar with these reports and how they might be applicable to you and your work, but I would love to see us come together as a conservation community. There are people that are very familiar with this landscape. I have to admit that north of Charlotte, I need some help. We're Southwest Florida. We're very focused on Southwest Florida, and I would love to team up with folks that are in this area north, that are along the Peace River, that are familiar with this corridor linkage, that can work together to hopefully secure this patchwork of conserved lands that will helpfully once that overpass is built, we're going to have an actual connection from where the Panthers are, mainly here in Southwest Florida, up through those landscapes and to that planned overpass. So next slide, and I think that's it. Feel free to reach out to me if you want to brainstorm further, or hope open to answer any questions.
Well, I'll just start with a comment, Amber. Thank you for that excellent presentation. This is Jennifer. The CHNAP Habitat Restoration Needs Plan that we developed using a habitat evolution model and whatnot. It took us several years to do all the GIS analysis and modeling and mapping of that. And we actually provided that to Julie Morris and the Fish and Wildlife Service, and they utilized that in the formation of the Everglades to Gulf Coast Conservation Area. So just wanted to give a shout out to the partnership for its role in helping to provide some of the baseline information that ended up helping the refuge design. So yeah, it takes a village, and a lot of the people that were in the partnership that were throughout the whole CHP area provided detailed input into that, kind of talking about the ground truth. And, a model of obviously needs to be calibrated, and ground truth essentially with people who really know the area. And we had the benefit of having people who were able to make some refinements of some of the modeling results based on their localized knowledge. So yeah, no, it's great to see that this work continues, and we really appreciate the update. Anyone else have any comments or questions?
I have a comment. I did the permitting for several of those Panther crossings along 29, and the one you had in the video looks to be the one that's near the Fakahatchee Strand entrance area. And then I also did an analysis along I-4 for FDOT in the Green Swamp area for where those locations should go and ranking them and stuff. And the one consistent thing in that is FDOT. They're just such a good partner to have in this. Brent Setchell is just a great advocate for wildlife crossings. And it just creates the opportunity when we live in a real fractured world today. It seems like these wildlife crossings can generate, a common ground for a lot of us.
Just to build off of that, I was excited and also surprised to hear about that first overpass in Florida. I didn't realize that would be a first, but that's a exciting opportunity to lay the foundation of that and see it duplicated throughout the state. So yeah, that's exciting.
There is an overpass that's on I-75 that then people will often say, "Hey, wildlife uses that," but I think that it's not primarily designated for wildlife. I think it's a mixed sort of like equestrian. But so this one on I-4 they say is the first that's designated, specifically for wildlife use. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I just got a follow-up question. I work a lot out in eastern Collier County. And you go down 29 and you had that as one of the hot spots in the bend of the road south of Immokalee. And there's the flashing light, that, and how is that triggered? Because it'll flash as a Panther in the area, but how is that triggered? Is that just
that's the roadside animal detection system, or RADS, RADS. So I think that system, they tried it actually first on US 41, where that hot spot was down in Collier County in the Big Cypress. and it just didn't really work well with the landscape there. So they are trying it there at the curve on State Road 29. I haven't heard any stats on, because it's relatively newly placed there, kind of how it's working, if some of the problems they encountered with false positives down on 41, if those have been remedied now in the new spot. But essentially, when with the radar, whenever an animal or a large object crosses that beam, basically is when those lights are meant to trigger. And they for whatever reason down in 41 kept having a bunch of false positives. So I think people were beginning to not pay as much attention when the lights were illuminated. So hopefully in this new location will be more successful. For Conservancy, I mean, like these technology things are so neat. I've been hearing from DOT that there's even some effort to, with all the technology in these cars these days, to incorporate some of reaction to some of these systems that are out on the landscape. For us, though, I mean, like let technology advance, but the underpasses and then this overpass, similarly, they work passively. You don't have to count on drivers to react or do the right thing or react in time. And so those for us still are the number one way to remedy the roadkill areas is with these and that was with the infrastructure, the crossings and the underpasses.
So any large mammal, a hog, a bear, a deer or something can trip it.
Yeah.
No, it seems like right when you get to that bend, people just go wide open. It's like a car race from there to I-4.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I've heard that.
Out
But
here.
I do think that there is a plan for in the future at I believe it's called Owl Hammock Curve. There on State Road 29. I do believe that there is a plan for a crossing structure at some point. So hopefully the RADs might help us in the interim, and then hopefully we will get that structure at some point.
Yeah, I had a question. Great information. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm really excited to hear about all of the progress towards, supporting these over and underpasses to help support our wildlife. I was just curious and seeing, how far north these are headed, if there was an updated population estimate for panthers north of the Caloosahatchee.
No, the last report that FWC did that was specifically focused on north of the river panthers was like 2017. And so it's actually something I've been probing with the agency as to can we get an update? Have they redirected focus from this? I think it's a good question because, we've had mama panthers now for the first time up north of the Caloosahatchee River. I believe the first was about 10 years ago now, 2016, 2017. And then we've had a couple, and we've had a couple killed, unfortunately, as well, in Glades County and a few other places. So I know we've had some presence of females and some loss of females, but I don't hear a lot from the agencies about reproduction, confirmed kittens that then are growing, that are surviving long enough to then have generation two. So I myself have these questions about how the panthers north of the river are doing. In terms of the panther population at large, they do use different models to try to guesstimate the population. The current population, like official, is 120 to 230, and that has not been updated in a long time. And really, that's sort of a guesstimate, but they do use these models based off of roadkill, actually, to try to give a sense of the trend of the population. And in the last couple of years, 4 or 5 years, it's believed that the population may be either kind of leveling out or potentially in decline. So it would be a very ripe time right now for us to be able to get more information from the agencies about the population, both at large and north of the river. So that is definitely on my wish list to the agency.
Excellent, thank you.
I have a question. About 5 or a little more years ago, University of Florida was doing a study, particularly down in the South, as to how much money farmers, ranchers should be paid when they prove that a panther has killed one of their animals. Do you know anything about if that study is continuing or anything?
Okay, I think I might know what you're referring to. Yeah, they went out and they actually collared a bunch of calves. I think 200 calves or something like that, just to get a sense of the mortality and the mortality causes. Because obviously you might have some ranchers who are attributing more of the losses to predators than is actual, or it might be things like weather or conditions or vultures or other things that are sickness, and not necessarily all panther. And so they did do this study to kind of get a sense of, at least in the study with those 100 calves on 2 different ranches, kind of what the proportions were of losses to panthers. I don't remember the proportions, the stats or the findings off the top of my head. It was like 5% or 10%, but I could find that study for you. It was, I think, less than what people anticipated, but it was still a proportion of the losses. And so I think based off of those studies, then FWC has really been trying to bolster the programs that they have over the last few years. They have actually come out with they had a pilot project, and now just in the last year, they've really formalized a payment for ecosystem services program specifically for panthers. And they've had their first run of applicants into the FWC program. They've selected people to participate, where they do these ranchers getting some payments for different habitat management activities they might be doing that are also contributing to keeping the land in good shape for panthers. Similarly, I think that they're looking at and different NGOs also looking at different direct payment programs. If there is a confirmed depredation by a panther, can we start compensating ranchers for those losses? So there's a lot of different programs in the works or that have recently come online. And I think that we're making a lot of strides on that, because for a long time, Conservancy's program perhaps was one of the only ones out there. And now I do think there's at least half a dozen similar type of compensation or payment for ecosystem services types programs that are becoming available for people.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, thank you, Amber. We really appreciate this presentation and for you taking your time to share this information with us.